Nil Khasevych, talented Ukrainian graphic artist, Patriot of Ukraine, who devoted his life to the fight for freedom and state independence of the Ukrainian people. He was the main artist of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, which operated on the territory of western Ukraine in the 40s and 50s of the last century. He was known under call signs as Bezot, Levko, Fisherman, 333, and Oldie. Only a few people knew who he actually was, what he did, and where he lived. His final resting place is still a mystery. The real name of this outstanding artist and fighter was kept a secret for many decades. His countrymen only remembered him at the start of the 1990s, when Ukraine acquired independence. His artistic legacy, which seemed to be hidden in KGB archives forever, was finally returned to the Ukrainian people. First and foremost, Nil Khasevych is a man of incredible talent and willpower. He is a true patriot and fighter for the freedom of Ukraine. He can be called the main propagandist of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. He was disabled from childhood, so he couldn't take up arms, but he fought by using the power of his art. He could have had everything. He could have worked at the best art workshops in Europe. But he chose the bunker, an underground life with endeavors and wishes to tell the people who they are and raise up the people in the fight for establishing their own state.
Бажанням розповісти людям, хто вони такі, є підняти цей народ на боротьбу за створення своєї держави.
The future artist was born in the autumn of 1905 in the village of Duksin, Rivne region. His father was a deacon and devout believer, and as though anticipating the fate of his youngest son, he gave him the Ukrainian male name of Greek origin, whose purpose is courageous protection and assistance to all those who are in trouble. This name also belonged to many saints and martyrs. Nil demonstrated an ability to paint from childhood. He also had a great singing voice. Having received an elementary education at the local parish school, Nil joined the Zhytomyr Theological Seminary. His father thought that as his eldest son, Fedor, had already become a priest, his younger sons, Anatoly and Nil, should also study there. We do not know for sure what compelled his father to change his mind, and how Nil persuaded him not to continue studying at the theological school. He leaves the seminary and starts painting. In 1918, his mother took Nil to Rivne to study artistic skills, but a tragedy happened on their way to this city. Their cart was run over by a train at a rail crossing. His mother died, and Nil lost a leg, which had to be amputated. Having become a disabled person, 13-year-old Nil did not want to be a burden to his relatives, so he combined studies with work by painting icons. It was only 6 years after this accident that the French company that owned the local railway paid compensation to Nil Khasevych. It was not a large sum of money, but it helped Nil to enroll in the Academy of Fine Arts in Warsaw. He became a student of the Academy of Fine Arts in Warsaw in 1930. He could not choose a specialization for a long time. First, Nil studied painting and drawing with the Kotorbinsky professors. Then he learned decorative weaving from Professor Tchaikovsky for some time. He devoted a certain period to teaching, and it was only in 1933 that he got involved in graphic art. He studied graphic arts with Professor Vladislav Skochilas. The name of Nil Khasevych as a talented painter becomes well known in 1931. That year he was awarded the Vatican Prize for his work The Washing, which he painted based on the village of Duksin. In 1933, his works are exhibited at art salons in Lviv, Berlin, Prague, Chicago, and other cities. He held about 35 exhibitions all over the world in the pre-war period. There were various works among the exhibits. In particular, the portrait Hetman Mazepa and Volodymyr the Great became quite well known.
Проте 34-35 Ніл Хасевич стає відомий в широких колах.
However, in 1934 to 1935, Nil Khasevych became famous among the general public. He was offered a lot of money to refuse from his Ukrainian nationality. He was offered the chance of becoming a Pole, but he was a conscious Ukrainian citizen. After he graduated from the academy, although he could have had anything he wanted, he goes to his native village, Duksin. There, he works as a teacher, creates a choir, engages in folkcraft, carves crosses, and sews clothing. This man stayed true to himself and wanted to remain a Ukrainian.
Був вірний собі, вірний своїм переконанням, вірним своїм принципам і, перш за все, він хотів залишитися українцем.
He intended to establish a school for artists together with his associates, but the beginning of the Second World War hindered his plans. With the coming of Soviet power to Western Ukrainian lands, Nil Khasevych had to shelve his plans about introducing his creative ideas. He continued to combine his work at school with the job of bookkeeper at a local store. The artist believed that something would change with the Nazis coming to power. Khasevych worked in the post of referent at the arts department of the Rivne District Council until he saw the real face of Hitler's power.
Проте дуже швидко зрозумів, що жоден
But he quickly understood that no occupier would ever care about the national ethnos that lived on occupied lands. So, seeing the reality of the new occupying authority and reprisals against his associates, he decided to go underground.
розправи над своїми однодумцями.
This happened in about March to April of 1943.
Березень-квітень 1943 року.
During the entire period of his underground work, Nil Khasevych was a member of the Regional Executive Office for Propaganda and was responsible for activity on the territory of Volyn. Unfortunately, there is no reliable information as to the location where the artist hid out and worked. What we do know is that he made stencils and sent them to the printing office of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army, and these postcards were then distributed everywhere on Western Ukrainian lands.
Пропаганди для ознайомлення.
It was necessary to propagandize and brief the population of the situation taking place at the end of the 1940s and start of the 1950s. And here we can see that the number of various documents, postcards and appeals to the population exceeds the number of graphic works done by Nil Khasevych.
Значно перевищують
While one or another graphic work was replicated to the tune of 5,000 or 6,000 copies, copies of postcards ran from 10,000 to 12,000.
від 10 до 12 тисяч екземплярів.
The artist constantly changed hiding places. Whenever necessary, the artist was taken by guards on a bicycle, while the necessary materials were taken to print. Nil Khasevych had a unique graphic relief technique called woodcut. It is used in printmaking.
Це техніка, власне, коли на шматочку дерева.
This is engraving a picture on a piece of wood. Wood is taken away from around the drawing, and the drawing is put on paper. So the technology and the print are called woodcut or derevorite.
Вони називаються дереворитами. І от, зокрема, його колега Петро Мечик, він згадував, що Ніл був...
His colleague Petro Mechik recalled that Nil was so diligent and vigorous that only he could work using this technique, because it required a lot of time and a great deal of effort and concentration.
Зусиль, зосередженості.
The master has a huge creative legacy. He illustrated the periodicals of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. Nil was also the author of a series of anti-Soviet political cartoons, placards of a propaganda agitation nature, and a series of placards entitled Volyn in Battle.
Це Волинь у боротьбі, яка розкриває нам.
The most famous of them is a series of the placards entitled Volyn in Battle, which highlights the life of Volyn in the second half of the 1940s. The series called Kolkhoz slavery or collective farm slavery is also one of the most popular.
Однією із його серій є така, як постаті, де він зображає і відомих діячів українського.
Another of the series of placards is called Historical Figures, where he portrays prominent figures of the Ukrainian liberation movement. These included Stepan Bandera, Klim Savur, and Roman Shukhevych, and also unknown ordinary insurgents, an example to be followed by everyone. There is also a series that can be called a documentary product consisting of postcards or UN appeals, small slogans used to appeal to people to fight.
Слогани, які повинні були наштовхувати народ на боротьбу.
Besides, Nil Khasevych was one of the first artists who depicted the national slogan of the fighters for independence under the title "Glory to Ukraine, Glory to Heroes." He was also the creator of medals and awards issued by the Ukrainian Insurgent Army and bofons, graphic cards that served as banknotes. Money, clothing, and food items in exchange for them were sent to the fighting fund. So the abbreviation bofons comes from the term Boyovy Fond in Ukrainian. The most popular series of bofons was the Volyn series developed by Nil Khasevych. While other series of bofons had 4 banknotes, this series had 8, 10, 20, 25, 50, 100, 300, 500 and 1000 карбованці.
Бофони, які були спроєктовані, розроблені.
The bofons developed by Nil Khasevych depicted more interesting things than banknotes. He tried to add some sort of artistic concept to them and planned to design them as the future money of the Ukrainian state.
Замисел, і він намагався їх спроєктувати як майбутні гроші української.
And it should be noted that they played such a role to a certain extent, because these bofons were used on the territory of 12 regions of Ukraine and in southern regions of Belarus, where the Ukrainian liberation movement was also active at the time.
Активним український визвольний рух.
The case against the Ukrainian bourgeois nationalist Nil Khasevych was opened by state security bodies as early as 1939. However, it was reopened in 1951. Then the drawings of Nil Khasevych got into the hands of delegates of the UN General Assembly. The inter-region group of the Ministry of State Security, headed by Boris Teklyar, was established especially for this purpose. High state agencies gave this group the task of finding the artists whose works got into the hands of UN delegates.
Знайти цього художника, роботи якого потрапили на стіл делегатам Організації Об'єднаних Націй.
Sometime later, Russian Secret Service agents called Chekists got on the artist's trail and tracked him down to one of the underground bunkers on the territory of Rivne region. On March 4, 1952, agents surrounded him and told the insurgents that they surrender. But they only heard silence in response. Smoke soon rose out of a form of ventilation pipe. The people inside were burning papers. Then the Chekists started throwing grenades into the hideout and everyone who was inside was killed. Nil Khasevych was also among them. The place of his burial is still not known. In July 1992, the Security Service of Ukraine in Volyn region handed over an art album under the title Bookmarks of Nil Khasevych, dating back to 1939 from its special archives to the funds of the Volyn Regional Museum. The book includes 24 drawings and woodcuts painted during Nil's membership of the Ukrainian Insurgent Army. In 2008, the second part of the materials from the State Branch Archives of the State Security Service was passed to the funds of the National Museum of the History of Ukraine in the Second World War for permanent storage.
Говорячи про передачу матеріалів Ніла Хасевича, ми говоримо про...
When talking of the transfer of Nil Khasevych's materials to the funds, we have in mind 2 art albums which served as material evidence in the past and were stored in the KGB funds of the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic and later in the funds of the Security Service of Ukraine.
5 червня 1950 року на типографії імені Тараса Шевченка.
One of these albums was seized from the Taras Shevchenko printing office, and the second art album was seized during the liquidation of Nil Khasevych. These art albums consist of 92 unique items and clichés for postcard.
А також кліше до листівки.
I want the world to know that the liberation fight is continuing and that Ukrainians are fighting. These words, uttered by the artist shortly before his tragic death, were the motto of Nil Khasevych, an outstanding fighter for the freedom of Ukraine. They are just as topical even today, at a time when Ukraine continues to fight Russian aggression in Donbass.